let's end the conversation with something that I found interesting about a week ago.
Okay.
I found it interesting, especially for you, because we have talked about issues like this. Nancy Derringer has a piece in the Detroit Free Press, and we're going to talk about the higher level as opposed to the individual bits. The piece is, it's time to let go of the past, Detroit. Let the Boblo boat sink.
Oof.
And it got a lot of attention. Of course, it would be interesting at some point to talk to Nancy herself about it. But Norris, I read this piece and I thought of you.
Yeah, because you know how I feel about nostalgia. Listen, I just want to read a very quick piece that just a paragraph that just hit me. She says, sink the Bobolo boat, drive the last muscle car off a cliff, stop playing Motown everywhere all the time, tear Detroit's eyes away from the rearview mirror, and start looking through the windshield. I love everything about that. And what I mean by that is, on the show earlier this week, we talked about the Michelin Green Guide and all the newness and the cool stuff that you're going to be able to do in the city of Detroit. And a lot of it is new. A lot of it is restaurants that have just came about in the past few years, bars that have just popped up in the past few years, and sharing that new and exciting energy that everybody's always talking about is really important. And you can still preserve the past and preserve the things that are important to your city, your town, your culture, without being mired in them. The Bobolo boat that she referenced, and this is the only specific thing that I'll say, is just on the Detroit River, just decaying. It's just sitting there, right? Just a rotting husk of its former self. When that could be easily picked up, preserved, put into a museum somewhere where we could give it its proper reverence, and then use that area for something way more productive.
I remember going to the Boblo Boat project a few years ago and getting a tour of it. And then we went by it on a boat. And I was like, wow, it really feels from the outside. There hasn't been much progress in the intervening time. It's tough because you know what, man? Change is hard.
It's not. It happens every day. It's inevitable. It's the only thing that will always happen. Why do people say that?
I think the fear is, though, is if we lose these things that's the thing. I don't think we would lose them. I think it's about an attitude of looking forward. I mean, look, even if you look at the studio, this is the kind of place where we have a lot of old Detroit stuff, but I've always been intentional about it's not all Fago and not all Burners. It's all kinds of niche, interesting, weird stuff, because I think there's so many people, and those are one of the reasons I have it. So we've got the old Detroiter radio behind me. Behind you, we have a duck decoy, because Detroit was a top duck decoy manufacturer.
A lot of people don't know.
They don't know about all these other things, the fact that we made stoves, all this other stuff. It's looking at what we could be. And, I have a place in my heart for the past, but I also think that we need to think about what we could be and not just what we were.
I agree.
And people move to cities for what they could be.
Right.
As opposed to what, they were.
And that's the thing. When you see this new energy and population growth that we're talking about, people are not moving to Detroit because of what it was. People are moving to Detroit because of what it is and what it can be. And that is what I want us to sort of kind of focus on. Because listen, I'm living downtown now, and I was, looking from my window and hearing the excitement during the tree lighting ceremony, which, by the way, I remember when we didn't have a tree lighting ceremony. That was a new thing we did. That's really cool. It's a tradition. Traditions are okay. Let's keep traditions. We love them, right? But I'm going to tell you, I got annoyed because they played Dancing in the Street again. And I'm sorry, Martha, but I don't never need to hear that song ever again in my life, Jer.
Ouch.
My life, okay?
Ouch.
Detroit makes so much great music, has so many great artists, has so many great things that we could display on the world stage, and we pick the same 7 damn songs to play all the time, everywhere. Get these people off the aux, okay? Get them off the aux so we can play some new Detroit music that's hype. Let's do it.
Let me double down on that. I will add that I am tired of official Detroit events using the same soundtrack, the same Stevie Wonder songs.
Yes.
The political events that use the same songs. That's no offense to Stevie.
No, we love Stevie.
And he can still be a little bit in there, but it feels like there's like a set playlist for every official Detroit event I have been to, and it's always Motown. It's very rarely any of the newer stuff that you see, even if you did electronic music, if you didn't want to have certain lyrics or whatever, which I understand.
Fine, yeah, sure. For family friendly, we get it.
Yeah. But I feel like there's like a formula to like the Detroit nostalgiaplex
Yeah.
that we need to break if we want to attract and get people interested in it more than the people that are there, to break through, circling all the way back to the mayoral conversation, to break through that apathy.
Yeah, I agree. And that apathy is sort of the thing, like, and I hate to say it because it just feels like people's idea of Detroit got stuck right there. Like it was like people's idea of Detroit got stuck at like 1964, right? And it's like their idea of what the city is still there and it never evolved. And all the stuff that was made from 1964 or 5 heretofore just doesn't exist. It just never happened because I don't know, maybe you was out in the burbs somewhere, and I love the suburbs, I'm not saying that, but maybe you were far away and you didn't know the stuff that was being made. Or maybe you're from somewhere else and your only context for Detroit was Motown and all the rest of that stuff. That's fine. But it's like, bro, like Jack White is down the street. Like, call him. Like, let's go. You know what I'm saying? Like, I appreciate Ford, like the Ford event that they had over the summer for the opening of or reopening of Michigan Central Station. Like, you started with Diana Ross, awesome, but we closed the night with, we had some Ghetto Tech in there, we had Jack White, we had Eminem, we had Big Sean, so we had kind of a much more, in my opinion, well crafted, well thought out smorgasbord of Detroit music that felt a little bit more even. And it didn't feel nostalgic. It didn't feel cheesy. It didn't feel corny. It just felt like a free concert. And maybe that's what it should just be from now on.
I think about some words that friend of the show, Sam Robinson, shout out to him, but some words he said about all of the Detroit music that's out there that doesn't get the appreciation
So much of it.
that it does other places,
Oh, dude, we could talk about all of techno. Like, all of our electronic music scene just does not get the love in the city that it does worldwide. But even beyond that, I mean, we could talk about, Peasy and Icewear Vezo and Sada Baby and Draco and so many of these artists that are in the city of Detroit that, because their sound is so unique, Babytron, that their sound is so unique that elsewhere in the country, people love it. And if you go in certain neighborhoods in Detroit, you will hear it. But you listen, you ain't about to hear no Babytron being played at the Shinola Hotel. And listen, I get it from a content perspective, but if we talking about just raw representation of moving forward, looking at the future, there's a lot of music here you could touch on, and other elements as well, brands, products, so forth.
I think about that in the context too of online communities, because we'll post stuff and we'll put things, whether it's on Instagram or Threads or whatever. You can always tell if it's like a looky-loo, and you're all welcome. It's great.
Yeah.
Or somebody who's been around, where they're like, any of those artists that you mentioned, if they come up in conversation and you go, and people go, what? I've never heard of them. And I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
Like, I don't listen to all their stuff, but I have listened to their stuff. I know they exist. I know that they're part of the context. And that's almost like a way to be like, oh, okay. There's kind of like the outsider's view of Detroit.
Yeah, and it's not about a purity test. I don't want anybody to think that this is what I'm saying, but I'm just imploring our greater sort of Detroit community, especially the Detroit community that throws these events and leans into the nostalgia of Detroit, is that there is new nostalgia being made every day. There is new memories being made every day. So let's not lean so much on the memories being made by people who are now 90 years old. And let's lean on the memories of people who are 30, 40, 50, and the Detroit that they remember, in the Detroit that they helped create. And maybe it takes for some of us to get in those positions of power, or maybe it just takes a difference in perspective. But there is so much here in the city of Detroit that we can wax poetically about. And for as much as I love Motown, I don't need the NFL to play any more Stevie Wonder songs when they come here.
Well, as always, if you've got thoughts, dailydetroit@gmail.com. I really appreciate you listening to this episode of Daily Detroit. We always kind of push the ideas a little bit here. As always, you can follow us on social media, Daily Detroit, at pretty much all of the things. I am Jer Stays. I really appreciate you listening. Thank you so much to our members on Patreon, patreon.com/Daily Detroit. Local media requires local support to survive. Say goodnight, Norris.
Good night, Norris.
Remember that you are somebody, and we'll talk tomorrow.